This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, welcome back, guys. Just getting into the risk part, and we're talking about asset protection. And when you think about asset protection, you're like, okay, so what are we protecting our assets from? What's going on out there where we need protection for our assets? Well, there's a lot going on out there, folks. I don't think it's a secret to know that we have a considerable litigious community with all the lawsuits that are going on. Being in the legal business myself, I have many friends who spend days, hours in court protecting their clients from lawsuits or even filing lawsuits themselves. So it's, we have both sides. It's an adversarial system where you have someone suing someone and someone protecting themselves from a suit. So in this case, we're talking about protecting from lawsuits. A lawsuit can take all sorts of, varieties. If you think about it, a lawsuit can be a divorce. That's a lawsuit. People take you to court to divorce you. That's a lawsuit. Creditor claims. A creditor can, take you to court because you miss, so many payments that they're going to take you to court. You can have angry partners, angry business partners that, that feel like they were wronged in you guys' business operation and that they feel that they want the courts to, find damages that will be awarded to them through a lawsuit. Tenants, they're very known for suing, anything, an electrical shock, flooding, a fire, anything, you name it, getting hurt. Slip and falls are probably the most popular one, especially up in the Northeast where we get a lot of snow and a lot of ice. And so the landlord is responsible to make sure that entering and exiting your unit is going to be safe. And so we get a lot of those up here. We talked about divorce earlier. Angry family members. One of my most famous cases that I helped to protect assets for was a client, and we had to go offshore for this particular client. And we went in country with the client before we set it up just to make sure that he was comfortable. So we introduced him to local politicians. Pardon me. We introduced him to local politicians, local bankers, local attorneys. And so he felt quite comfortable moving assets offshore. Now, I don't want to give too much detail because it will be easy to find who I'm talking about, but let me give you as much as I can. So this particular client, his uncle was a famous engineer for a famous automaker out of Germany. And he was, the uncle was one of the founding engineers for that organization. And as such, the uncle had a tremendous amount of wealth. The uncle did not have children. And the uncle's first wife had already passed away, and the uncle was aging. He was probably in his 80s. He was still living when I took the case, and I think he was in his 80s. And the nephew was in his 40s. And so the nephew hired me because the uncle had given him substantial assets, including some of those first vehicles that came off the factory floors back in the day. And so he gave these to his nephew, and along with about $500,000 in cash. So he gave him these vehicles that were probably worth millions by themselves and cash. Now, the uncle's first wife passed away, and uncle got remarried, and he married a younger bride. And so the uncle contracted a terminal disease, and he knew he was dying. So he wanted to, since he didn't have children, he wanted to gift a lot of his assets to his nephew. So his nephew had already received quite a few assets. And then the new wife got wind that the uncle was gifting away assets. And she was hoping to get these assets when he eventually passed away. So this was a family member suing a family member to return assets back to the uncle's estate. And so the nephew hired me to move these assets out of the jurisdiction of the United States because the new aunt could easily get a good lawyer and find a judge who will order him to return those assets back to the uncle's estate. So with that being said, the best thing for us to do would be to move them outside the jurisdiction of the United States. So we went to Belize in this particular scenario to set up outside entities to hold the assets. Now, we could not move the physical automobiles. I mean, I guess we could have, but it would be no fun to have these autos in Belize when this particular client lived in the United States. But we did want to set up things to keep the cash outside the jurisdiction of U.S. courts. And so we were able to do that successfully. And so she did file suit, and they started going after my client. But when my client told them, and when we move those assets, we are all legit. The reason I stress being legit is because if anything like this happens, we want to show the courts that we are following all compliance issues, all legal requirements for moving any assets offshore, and we do. It includes giving disclosure to the IRS that we're moving the assets. As long as there's no criminal intent in doing so, it is not illegal. It's not even bad to do that. You can do that. Some judges won't like it, and some judges will try to intimidate you to get you to move it back. But I encourage my clients. Now, that didn't happen in this case, but I'm just saying, if it were to happen, I would encourage my clients to keep a stiff upper lip and, risk being held in contempt of court, and then facing whatever thing might come out of that, which is typically some type of temporary jail time until they find out that you're not going to comply, and then they'll eventually let you go. We have cases out of Florida that will back that up. But anyway, so it's important that we get them out of the reach of the United States jurisdiction. The reason that we do that is because they can order you to move them back, but your trustee in Belize doesn't have to listen to a United States judge order anything. And the only way that the local authorities will even entertain a U.S. Judge's order is if it's a criminal, if there's something criminal intent behind it. And here there was no criminal intent. It's just arguing family members arguing over money. And so there was no criminal intent. The Belize authorities wouldn't even hear it. They don't even want to hear it. It doesn't involve any intent or any criminal intent. Then it's a moot point with them. And so that's why we do that. That's why it's important to understand the background and the reason for that, and what risk could be, or what types of risk we could be facing. And so that's why we do that. So and so this goes down here. The last part here says where it has to be legal. All transactions have to be legal and declared through U.S. from IRS forms and filed accordingly with the requirements. And we do that. We make sure that all of that stuff is above board when we move it. Okay. All right. With that being said, guys, we're going to finish up with this one, and then we'll see you in the next one. Thanks.
The recording has stopped.
Fantastic. And that's crazy. So that stuff really went down with your clients in Florida?
Yeah, that's a true story. Yeah.
Wow. That's wild. Okay.